Only on Fox tonight. It's an in-person meeting no one would expect.
A longtime crime victims advocate and one of the nation's most notorious serial killers sits down face to face. Fox 26's Randy Wallace joining us live from Southwest Houston with this exclusive. Randy.
Rashi, for some 20 years, crime victims advocate Andy Kahn and serial killer David Berkowitz, a.k.a. Son of Sam, have been writing to each other. Why? They share a common goal called murderabilia, or profiting from heinous, headline-grabbing crimes.
I want Stacy's killer.
The Son of Sam.
The Son of Sam.
David Berkowitz.
The Son of Sam.
David Berkowitz.
The Son of Sam.
At the age of 23, David Richard Berkowitz spent a year terrorizing New York City. From July 1976 through July 1977, he killed 6 people and wounded 7 others. He gained worldwide notoriety by not only eluding police, but mocking them by leaving letters about his deadly crime spree. He's been in prison now for 44 years.
It's probably the most bizarre partnership.
Since 2000, crime victims advocate Andy Kahn has led the charge to stop high-profile killers and others from profiting from their deadly deeds.
But I also knew that perhaps a lot of the killers, like Berkowitz and others, might not even be aware their stuff was being sold. I mean, so I did what you would do. I went fishing.
And he caught a big one. Kahn sent letters to 20 serial killers. 12 responded.
And there were 2 that really stood out. David Berkowitz was one of them.
It's being sold.
With Berkowitz's help, Kahn pushed for laws that would bring the profitable murderabilia industry to a halt.
Okay, he's a serial killer. Like, he's the one that you watch Netflix shows about and you read about in the news.
I remember Kahn and Sidney Zeiker requested and got an interview with Berkowitz for a Crime Stoppers podcast. They traveled to a prison in upstate New York.
When you think of a serial killer, you kind of expect you're going to meet them. They're going to come in shackles. There's going to be guards everywhere.
I'm not absolving him of what he did. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. I mean, he deserves to be where he is, and he knows it as well. And to be frank, as I told him one time, you know, if you were in Texas, you and I wouldn't be talking because you wouldn't be breathing. That's just reality.
Do you mind if I put a mic on you here? So he's just sitting there, and I'm like clipping, and my hands are like, I hope I don't mess up.
Nobody would ever dream this was the notorious Son of Sam that caused terror and rampage in the streets of New York City.
Regardless of what happened with me in the past, which I'm so very sorry for, you know, I'm still a human being. He's a human being. We have feelings, we have emotions, we have concerns, I have regrets, and I feel that it's the right thing to do, and we hit it off because we're 2 Jewish guys. So.
Berkowitz has no internet access, but does have email.
For many years, I was in the dark ages when it came to electronics, you know, and just about maybe a year and a half ago, they finally allowed us to have these small tablets where I can email, because that's how we stay in touch now.
The 2-hour discussion includes some surprises.
I did not know that he had communicated with one of the victims' families. I was not aware of that.
Berkowitz is no doubt a model prisoner who has done what society would want an inmate to do.
This person has a soul too, and what are we asking of them as a violent offender who needs to stay where he is? Again, I'll say he needs to stay where he is.
Now, I'll have more on this unprecedented interview between Kahn and Berkowitz on tomorrow night's newscast at 9. Now, be sure to check out the Crime Stoppers podcast. We've got links for you on our website. Reporting live from the Southwest side, Randy Wallace, Fox 26 News.
Switching gears tonight, we continue our Only on Fox look at an unprecedented meeting.
A longtime local crime victims advocate with one of the nation's most infamous serial killers sitting face to face. And Fox 26's Randy Wallace joining us live from Southwest Houston with more of this exclusive conversation. Randy.
Caitlin, Son of Sam killer David Berkowitz is a good example of a model prisoner. But most people say he should never be paroled.
I want Stacy's killer.
The son of Sam.
The son of Sam.
David Berkowitz, the son of Sam.
David Berkowitz.
The son of Sam.
At the age of 23, David Richard Berkowitz spent a year terrorizing New York City. From July 1976 through July 1977, he killed 6 people and wounded 7 others. He gained worldwide notoriety by not only eluding police, but mocking them by leaving letters about his deadly crime spree. He's been in prison now for 44 years.
I'm a pretty hardball as you can get. I mean, I've been to 8 executions with victims' families. So there's no wavering on where I stand on the issue of punishment.
Andy Kahn with Crime Stoppers would be the first to admit serial killer David Berkowitz was a huge ally in his fight against murderabilia, an industry where high-profile killers like Berkowitz and others could make big bucks off of headline-grabbing crimes.
People are fascinated by certain kinds of crimes, or they want souvenirs or things like that. That's part of our culture.
And David Berkowitz is a household name.
You're not going to have serial killers like David Berkowitz. You're not going to have catchy nicknames like the son of Sam anymore. They're a dying breed.
And so many people don't make it that long in prison, and if they do, they're not functioning to the same capacity that he has.
Berkowitz began his 40-plus years in prison at Attica, one of the most notorious prisons in the country.
One of the things that was most interesting to me is to see his giant scar that he has right here on his neck from an altercation he had at Attica.
Another inmate wanted to make a name for himself by killing Berkowitz.
I was very fortunate, very fortunate. He missed my carotid artery by just a hair's breadth, and had he struck that, I wouldn't be here today.
I think that he's found a way to thrive in a very controlled environment.
Berkowitz recalled when another inmate said to him, "God loves you."
Listen, there's no way God loves someone like me. I've done too much evil. I've done too many bad things. I doubt if God will ever want to forgive me or even want to have anything to do with me.
Berkowitz says he's turned his life over to God.
I'm sorry I hurt my parents. I'm sorry I hurt innocent people. I regret it with all my heart. And I just poured my heart out to him.
Now he's an elder in the prison's church.
And I also work as a mobility assistant, which means handicapped guys that need assistance getting around. I work in the unit with them. And so that's really, I get a lot of joy out of that, a lot of satisfaction.
Kahn and Sidney Zeiker, also with Crime Stoppers, recorded their meeting with Berkowitz for their Balanced Voice podcast.
We can yell and scream all we want, but isn't he doing something you want inmates to do? Remorseful, repent, give something back to society.
Even though he's serving 6 consecutive life sentences, Berkowitz still periodically comes up for parole. In the past, he's told New York parole officials he's not interested. He's up for parole again next year. Berkowitz seems to be torn, even over the remote possibility of being free.
Of course, I think he should stay there, but I'm also think that he's kind of a success story.
Be sure to watch the Balanced Voice podcast produced by Crime Stoppers with Berkowitz. We've got links for you on our website. Jonathan, Caitlin.
Randy, you have covered a lot of crime. You've interviewed a lot of criminals. You've interviewed Andy Kahn a few times. A lot of this is weird to see them talking. What was the biggest standout to you as you looked at all this and put this all together?
Well, here, I've done a lot of prison inmate interviews. I did one just last week, and they're behind glass. There's no like direct where you can touch each other. And I just almost cracked up when Berkowitz just kind of reaches over and touches Andy Kahn. I mean, they were in a very intimate setting for a prison interview.
Yeah, that kind of access just so rare. Well, Randy, if anybody missed the first part of your story, we have that also on our website, fox26houston.com. Randy Wallace live tonight. Thank you.
Do you still keep in touch with your dad?
Yes.
Without getting too personal, how's he doing?
He's doing fine. But he asked me not to talk about it.
I understand. That's what I said.
Safeguard his privacy and privacy of his family.
Okay. In terms of the correspondence you carry on with the different people and different ministry people and so on and so forth, what's your mail flow like around here? And I don't mean recently.
It's been a lot. Been a lot. I don't make a big deal of it. I just consider it as part of my life now, part of it, in a sense, part of my ministry. I get letters from people from all walks of life. Most people are sincere. Some are having, very serious problems. And for whatever reasons, God, I believe, leads them to me. And I'm able to minister to them and encourage them, share Christian gospel with them, even some teenagers. And so it's been good.
It's sort of ironic, isn't it? I mean, you're doing all this stuff through the mail these days. You keep the post office busy. What's that, a little nod of loyalty to your old employer? Once a postman, always a postman? Does this, all this work that you're doing now, do you feel that this is helping you make up for some of the bad stuff that you were involved in? Do you feel like you're paying back a little bit?
Yeah, these things, first of all, I want to be a good Christian because I want to please the Lord, but it's my way of saying that I'm sorry for the things that happened in the past, and I'm sorry for being that bad person and being a fool, and this is my way of, if I could reach out to some young person and through the videos and so forth that are going all over the place in schools and churches, youth facilities, prisons, I know that if I reach some of them with that warning that you don't want to come to prison, that you don't want to throw your life away, that you could have a better life through Jesus Christ, if somehow I could touch some of them and get them to change their direction, then it would have served a purpose. I really believe with all my heart that the message that I'm sharing today through the written pamphlets or through the videos have actually saved a lot of lives, and there's ministers to verify that, where they're kids or whatever who've heard that message and have, instead of going in the path that they were going, which may have led eventually to a graveyard, an early grave, they've given their life to Christ instead, and they're better people today because of it. And so I'm thankful for that. That's truly a blessing. And that's not me doing that. I believe it's God. God works through people, ordinary people.
Let me ask you something. Prison, of course, is for punishment, but it's for something else too. Rehabilitation. Is that correct? The purpose of prison, I mean, people get sent to prison for punishment, but isn't it a fact that prison systems also like to rehabilitate people if they can?
I guess you could say that, yeah. Certainly, they want someone to learn their lesson where they don't come back to a place like this and don't throw their life away and hurt some other lives and damage other people. You would hope that someone would come to prison and, if they do get out, they would learn their lesson. But I feel that for what I see more than that is prison is a place of reflection and self-examination where a man is forced to come to terms with himself. You take a guy that's 30 years old, 40 years old, maybe he's got a couple of kids out there, maybe a wife, maybe he's with her, maybe he's not, but here's a guy that's an adult and he's in prison doing time, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years or more. There has to, it's like a point of reality where you got to face yourself and say, man, what am I doing with my life? What am I doing? Where am I going? What's my goal? What's my direction? And I think that being in prison now 22 years, I've seen a lot of men come to terms with that, where they realize that they, at some certain point, they realized that they were doing like traveling a dead end, traveling a road to destruction. And that's where, like in here, the chapel has been such a blessing, where we have a chaplain that, ministers to the men, and we have a place where guys go for nurturing and encouragement.
To you, speaking of punishment, I mean, the death penalty wasn't in effect in New York when all of the 44 incidents went down. If you, even for your role in it, how would you have felt if the death penalty was still around then, or was around then? Did you care at that point?
There was a time when I had given up hope. I feel so far under satanic power and satanic control that I didn't care. I was more like a robot than a person. There was a time in my life when I feel that I was just utterly under a powerful influence that was destructive, and I didn't care if it was a point where I didn't care if I lived or died.
How did these people get such control over you?
It was a process. It took time. It was like little by little. I mean, I'm telling you, I didn't know it was going to come this way. I mean, when I got out of the service, I wanted to make a life for myself. My dad was moving to Florida. Most of my friends had all gone or all changed directions in their life, and I just wanted to make a life for myself. I got an apartment. I had saved up, and when I was in the service, enough money to buy a used car, to rent an apartment. I got a job as a security guard. I enrolled in Bronx Community College. I wanted to have a future, you know, and I don't know, everything got turned upside down. I had good goals, and I just fell into under some kind of powerful influence. I mean,
you were a middle-class guy.
Yeah.
Middle class. Family's middle class, you were middle class. Now, based on what I understand, there were some people involved in this circle, if you will. There were some money people.
Yeah.
There were some influential people, high rollers. So you saw some of the high life, so to speak, right? I mean, do you think that had some of it too? You say, wow, these rich people are out doing this, so it can't be all that bad?
I don't know. I just kind of fell into the flow of things, and I never really looked at it or analyzed that of their lifestyle.
Yeah, but you
just
would
accepted it. I didn't really want that. See, to me, I was always content money or that kind of thing never really impressed me. I was just content to maybe have a job, raise a family, live in the suburbs one day. That was my goals in life. Wasn't to be a millionaire or ride around in a big car, and those material things just never really impressed me. There were people that had that, and you know, I just didn't think one way or the other.
Okay, that's what I was getting at, because if I recall correctly, you were at parties in the Hamptons and in Greenwich, Connecticut, and some big places in Manhattan and Westchester County, and you saw some of these people with some bucks. I mean, I was trying to find out if that was part of the thing that helped entice you into this, saying, wow, these people are into this and look at all they got.
No, I was just mainly a tag-along guy, and just didn't really get impressed with that.
All right. This is a very valid issue. This we've talked about in the past, and this is that there was a great deal made of the fact that in around Mother's Day of 1975, you finally found your natural mother.
Yes.
And there was one psychiatrist in particular who would later say that this is what put Berkowitz over the edge. He was so filled with rage because he had met his natural mother and she was a disappointment, etc., etc. Would you respond to that?
Yeah, I did find my natural mother. It was something that I just had in my heart to do. I had come across some literature from the Adoptees Liberty movement, and this was back in early 75 or somewhere around 74. And I just suddenly had this urge to go see if I can possibly find my natural parents, because I was always curious. It was always like a driving thing. And to make a long story short, I did meet, as you said, it was in 75. I even lost track of the time. I did meet my natural mother, and she turned out to be a very nice person. And we got along really good, typical Jewish mother. And I found out I had a half-sister, and we really kind of hit it off pretty good. I started to go over to their house all the time. I was out in where my sister lived in Queens. She's long since moved away. My mom lived out in Brooklyn just briefly, and then moved to Long Island, to Long Beach. And I was over at her house a number of times. We had a fine relationship, and she used to cook meals, and it was totally false that I had any rage or animosity towards her. I feel that at that time with that psychologist, he was mainly, and this is not a criticism, but just looking back, he was mainly interested in fitting me into these different molds that he already had. As a Freudian psychologist, he had these certain molds you have to go into. It always reverts back to the childhood, the mother, a bad relationship. But that was completely false.
Which brings something to mind. Somebody, not you, told me a long time ago that you had actually read a book called The Murdering Mind to be familiar with some of the psychology of this kind of stuff so that you could give the right answers to shrinks.
Yeah, that's true, yeah.
It's true.
Yeah.
So are you saying you were just parroting back to them what you thought they wanted to hear?
Yeah, yeah. But there was a whole reason for that too. It's such a long story. It was that McGraw-Hill thing with Mr. Klausner and all the stuff that resulted from that. I had felt really betrayed by the attorneys, and it's no big deal. At that time, I was in a really depressed frame of mind, just coming into prison and, you know, just facing everything. It was just so overwhelming. And then when I found out that the attorneys that represented me had been working out a deal to write a book with this guy, and eventually a book was published by McGraw-Hill, which I think it didn't do well. It kind of bombed. But anyway, at that time when I found out that was coming out, I contacted Mr. Abrahamson, Dr. Abrahamson, and kind of pretty much told him what he wanted to hear, you know. And that was foolish. I mean, at the time, I was just handling everything the wrong way. And at that time, I was, you know, depressed and suicidal in prison, and you know, I just.
At that time, were you still involved in the occult?
I used to practice in the very beginning, like rituals in my cell and everything. It was stupid. It was stupid.
Yeah, we're talking about that, not now.
Yeah, I know,
I'm
but it
asking
was
about
just,
that.
yeah, it was, yeah.
So when you first came to prison and for a period of time, you were actually doing your own private rituals in your cell?
Briefly, yeah. Yeah. And, I mean, I just, I was locked into a certain way of thinking. It's just impossible to explain, and I really hesitate to talk about it because sometimes it's just so taken out of context and misunderstood. But I was just into a type of thinking which I believe that later on in life, Christ had completely set me free from. And if it wasn't for my faith in Christ, if it wasn't for that other inmate reaching out to me one day and beginning to share his faith with me and bring me along that path, I probably would be just a miserable, lonely individual now, just caught up in my own world.
Or in the ground.
Or in the, yeah. I believe God spared my life. I don't know why. There's so many times I'm talking to the Lord when I say my prayers, say, why, God? Why did you spare my life? And he just keeps reassuring me that he loves me and that things are going to be okay.
Now, isn't it so that a substantial number of people whom you were associated with on the streets back in 76 and 77 are in the ground?
That's what I've heard. I don't know how accurate all that is. I've heard, that the Carr brothers and so forth have lost their lives shortly after I was arrested. What exactly transpired, I don't know.
Well,
there's been a lot.
Young girls like Dawn Coons
Yeah.
and Frank Signorelli died in jail, and Joe Carrozza, who had the yacht in New Rochelle,
Yeah.
and so on and so forth. I mean, there's a laundry list of people
Yeah.
who died violently, either
Yeah.
murder, accidents, overdoses, suicides.
That's what happens when, this is why I try so fervently to reach people with the gospel, because I know what Satan can do to a person. Satan can utterly destroy a human life, and just as the Bible says that Satan comes to steal, kill, and destroy, but that Christ comes to give an abundant life. And if people dabble in things, if they follow that path that I was on, eventually they can end up destroying themselves, because there are powers behind the scenes. I know that many people say, oh, bah humbug, I don't believe that stuff. Well, it's true whether people believe it or not. It's reality. There are powers, entities that people get involved with that could twist a person's mind and ultimately destroy that person's life.
Do you remember Jimmy Kahn? Not the actor.
Yes.
The one who lived in your building.
Yeah.
After you got arrested, Kahn went up to his job trying to get a gun because he said people were now after him. Now, Kahn was involved in this case, at least in terms of Untermeyer Park,
Yeah.
not at crime scenes. And he drove that yellow VW once in a while. Well, Kahn is the latest one. I don't know if you're aware of this, but Kahn committed suicide around last Thanksgiving. So, for the record, it's up to, that we know of, about 21 people who were associates of yours in one way or another on the wrong side of this case have died since your arrest, and only one of them, whose name we know, Mr. D, died of natural causes, and he was elderly. All the others were young and unnatural causes. Does that say anything to you about all this?
Yeah, that the devil means business. It doesn't play. That's what I've been sharing in my testimony time and time again, that the devil does not play. And person follows him or serves him, they're throwing their life away. They don't know what they're getting into. What could start out as dabbling could ultimately lead to total possession. I've seen it in the past. I know what happened to me. And I hesitate to share these things in the public because it just sounds so unbelievable. People really can't accept that. They don't really understand, or my words get twisted. It's been a real uphill battle to even share. But mainly today, I just see that my calling in life, what I feel is my calling, is to share the good news of Jesus Christ and to reach as many with that message of hope as possible. I mean, even in other countries today, you know, the videos are going into the Philippines, into Russia, they're translated in different languages, Romania. And I mean, I have to look at that and say, well, I can't do anything about the past. I made wrong choices. I did foolish things. I threw my life away. I hurt other people and destroyed their lives, and I'm sorry for that. I can't change the past anymore. If I only knew what I was getting into at the beginning, as I said, I would have just ran away. But
rejoin the army. That would have, even to that.
As I said, when I left the service, I was all ready to begin a new life. I had bought a expensive stereo system, a Sansui stereo system overseas, where the rates were cheap. I had it shipped to the United States. I got my own apartment, my own car. I saved up money when I was in the service. I enrolled in the Bronx Community College. I got a part-time job. I was going to school under the GI Bill. I thought I had a future, you know, and then everything just flipped around. I didn't think I'd ever end up in a place like this.
Oh, it's the Catskills. What are the Jewish comedians come together? Why do you think, go ahead, Lisa.
In terms of, you know, you said you had a dream, you know, to have the typical, you know, somebody growing up in the 50s, the wife, the kids, the suburbs. I was wondering if more could ask you, have you had any kind of a romantic relationship with anyone, maybe somebody whose heart was drawn to you and they began writing to you? I know that happens.
That's an interesting human interest kind of question. Some of, let's say, female friends over the years, without names, just in general, who you've corresponded with, you know, just, you know, you've developed some female friends, is that correct?
Well, I wouldn't say like that, like really romantic. I do have, but this is off the record, I think. I do have, because I want to protect the privacy. I learned to, this is my life. This is going to be the rest of my life. And but it's hard to describe it. It doesn't bother me anymore because God has given me peace about it, and I can accept, you know, this is kind of where I am, where I'll be.
People get married even with life, even with
Yeah.
this consecutive life.
Yeah, they do.
Eric Menendez got married behind bars. So no marriage plans at all.
No marriage plans.
At least not at the moment.
No.
You know, if I can, let me see if I can get this idea right that Lisa talked about before. It's the idea that there are as many, the authorities say that there are as many as perhaps 50 serial killers going around America at one time. And I mean, from the point of view of somebody who had been involved in something like that, granted not by yourself, I mean, is there something that the authorities should do or people should be on the lookout for as a way to help identify this kind of thing?
You know, I'm not really an expert on that. Those people come from all walks of life. There's a lot of, see, the way I look at it from the eyes of a person like who's like a minister today, and I see that there's just a lot of hurting people out there, a lot of confused, lonely, troubled people, and a lot of angry people, a lot of tormented people. And that's why, you know, as a Christian, I try to reach as many as I can, because I believe with all my heart that it's a personal relationship with God that can give a person hope, that can give a person meaning in life. I don't know what causes that kind of behavior. I really don't know it, understand it at all.
So you're not auditioning for the job as host of America's Most Wanted, I think.
No.
No, but I mean, it's more the concept in terms of how should a person know if there's someone who needs help so badly, who's so troubled that they're going to cross that line and commit murder?
Yeah.
What advice would you give to someone to look out for so that maybe they could get someone to help them?
Family members, friends.
Wow, that's...
Because that's something you would know from ministering to people, because you've seen the people who need the help so badly. What
Yeah.
are those symptoms? You could tell more.
Wow. Take your time.
I mean, if you were one of them, you could reach into your own past or
Yeah.
any other person that you've met in this environment, when I'm sure there were plenty.
Well, I think that what people need is closeness. In society today, people are so far apart, and even in families, so many families are broken homes. And I don't mean just the broken homes in the sense that maybe dad's in prison or mom and dad are separated or something like that. But sometimes the family could be in, like, all under the same roof, mom and dad and the kids, and yet the home can still be broken because people are not communicating. There's no real bonding. There's no deeper love. It's sometimes even in one's own home, there could be strangers. I think it's so important for people to communicate and to spend time with one another in a family unit as much as possible. I know that, for example, in the incident in Columbine, those kids had parents, and they were from homes that on all purposes seemed to be stable and so forth. And yet, some ways you look at that, and yet there was, within the home, there was a broken relationship. And it seemed like those parents really didn't have an understanding of how far into, let's say, just use the word evil, those kids had fallen. And the parents seem to be, from what I understand, just kind of oblivious to that. My heart goes out to them, because I'm sure they must be struggling with that very much, asking themselves a lot of questions, why? But I can see that there's a need for people to be closer and to know one another better.
So what signs then would those parents have seen? That's, you know, what is it that you would see in someone that would say to you, aha, the light goes off on top of your head. That person's about to blow up the high school, or that person's about to, you know, shoot people. What is it that you would recognize in another human being that would tip you off so that you could say, Jesus, I've got to help this person? You know, that's the kind of thing I'm just curious about.
Okay. Well, I think that sometimes with, like, let's say teenagers or young adults, there's an obsession with death. There's a sense of loneliness, a sense of hopelessness, a sense of despair. I think that a person that's going through some kind of self-destructive or destructive thoughts kind of isolates themselves from others. And if a person's in a home with somebody, they see them becoming detached, remote, aloof, there's maybe a time to just kind of reach out there. It's like, hey, what's going on with your life? I see you're struggling with something. What's on your mind? Let's share. Let's open up a little bit. A lot of times, people just need someone to really talk to, someone to spend time with them, a friend or a family member that's going to stick close with them. And when these things are not there, people it's so easy to get into their own frame of mind, and their world becomes real small, and they don't see the whole picture. They begin to just dwell on their own problems, their own anger, their own frustrations in life, and those things begin to percolate inside of a person, build up, and next thing you know, you have some kind of rage, anger, something like that. I see that people need to know that there's a God, that cares about them, that there's a God that has a place in life for them. I think in here, I know a lot of guys feel very maybe insignificant in the world or so forth, but I don't see myself that way anymore. I see myself as a person who has a purpose in life. I get up in the morning with a sense of purpose as a Christian. Well, I'm going to do the best I can to share with somebody today, to reach out to somebody today, to encourage them. Without those things, I just don't see how people can make it in this world. People try to lose themselves in all kinds of things. And when a person begins to become aloof, that's usually a sign that they're going through something.
Well, don't you think people withdraw too? I mean, there's different forms of withdrawal. I mean, you can withdraw into TV, into the internet, into drugs, into alcohol.
Yeah.
I mean, not in here. Nobody here's on drugs, alcohol, or on the internet, and they're certainly not watching too much TV. I don't think. It's just another one of the things of the case. You know how myths travel on and on about this brown-haired girls and all that. Was there anything to that?
No.
Okay.
And I just, in terms of just reaching back to your lowest point, because you've come so far from so low, if you could try to talk a little bit of just comparing how you felt, if you could just reach into your heart and try to talk a little bit about feeling like you were in the depths of that moment where suicide was clearly something that would have been an option. Right now, it's the last thing that you would consider because you have a purpose, and I'd love you to.
That's. I think that's a very reasonable question too, Dave. That's one we tried earlier and you didn't want to talk about. I just asked you if you could contrast or compare the David Berkowitz of 1977 to the David Berkowitz today. The difference.
The David Berkowitz of the past was a very guy living without any hope, and was a very troubled and tormented person. I believe that I was demon possessed, and the reason is because I allowed Satan to enter into me, and through rituals and incantations and other stupid things. I look back at that and say, man, that was garbage. I was an idiot to even do those things, but I didn't think it was going to end in destruction of others and even throwing my own life away. But today, thanks to Christ, today I'm living with hope. I know that God has forgiven me, even though others may never forgive me, and I have peace with God. I have peace with myself. I have joy. I have a future, and I believe that Christ is coming soon, and one day I'm going to be with him. One day, that's one of the tenets of the Christian faith, is that Christ will come again. And when that happens, in an instant of an eye, I'll be up in heaven with him. And that's a hope that millions of Christians have. I live with that hope, and I face the future looking forward to being the best I can be as a person, and trying to touch as many lives as possible, trying to reach out to as many as possible in the time I have left, however long that may be.
Now, you said that you believe that God has forgiven you.
Yes.
But have you been able to forgive yourself, or is that something you'll never be able to do?
There was a long time of struggle where I couldn't forgive myself. And I went through a lot of pain during that time period. But one day a minister was preaching a sermon from the book of Micah, the prophet, and he talked about God taking all your sins and throwing them into the sea of forgetfulness, never to be remembered anymore. And as he was speaking, I felt like God's Spirit, I know it's a hard thing to understand, but I kind of sensed God's Spirit just kind of bloom in me in that moment where I felt God was reaching out to me and saying, David, your sins are forgiven. David, I've completely forgiven you. I love you. I want you to know that. And right then and there, it's like a light went off inside me. And I knew from that moment that my sins were completely forgiven. They were forgiven the moment I came to Christ, but it took me a number of years before I was finally able to realize the need to just forgive myself and to let go. And that's what I try to do today, is just let go of the past as much as possible. I hate talking about it. I hate dwelling on it. It's like another life that I don't even recognize anymore.
Now, you were talking about forgiveness in a spiritual sense.
Yes.
But I don't think that you're implying, or are you, that the rest of society should just say, okay, no harm, no foul?
No, not at all. I mean, I committed serious crimes. I deserve to be in prison for the rest of my life. I recognize that. I know that people will never forgive me. That's okay. That's normal, you know. But still, my life goes on.